Just a quick note on this part of the video. This part will be on finding RAM addresses in BizHawk. I have made a separate tutorial on this a couple of years ago that goes more in depth. I'll leave a link to that in the description. In this part, we're going to be looking at RAM watches, how to find RAM values in the game, why is it useful, and how to use them to optimize a TAS. So everything in the game is in RAM, and RAM is just everything the game is keeping track of right now. So it's a big list of numbers, and it's stuff that the game is remembering. So if I start just messing with this, the game will not get very happy. And probably crash? Yeah, probably crash. There we go. So yeah, don't just mess with the RAM. That's not good. But there's lots of useful stuff stored in RAM. So one very good example of something that's stored in RAM would be like your health. So my health is 3 at the moment. If I lose a health, it goes down to 2. That's just something that's stored in RAM. And it's pretty easy to find this. So we'll use a tool called RAM search because we don't want to like look through here for things that are 3. Let's use our RAM search and we're going to start a new search. We're going to look for a specific value. That value is 3. So we're looking for our health in RAM. And we want this to be equal to 3. It's going to be 1 byte and we're going to search for it here. Now this is every frame. So you can see that like sometimes this thing is flicking between 0 and 3 for some reason. So that's obviously not our health. So we're just going to click search a few times until all those flickery ones goes away. Now I've got a few candidates for what our health could be. If we move a bit, this one will change. So it looks like that one's not our health. We can remove that manually. And we'll keep going through. So I'm going to get hit. Our health is going to go down to 2. And then I'm going to search for something that is 2. There it is. So either of these two things are probably going to be our health. If I get hit again, both of these go down to 1. So it could be either of these two. Now, the way that you can tell is I could poke this and set it back to 3, and my health is back to 3. Or I could try poking this one and setting it down to 1, but nothing happens. So it looks like this top one might be our health. I could try to set it to 4, and I don't really know what will happen there. If I get hit, it's down to 3, and then if I get hit again, it's down to 2. Now, there's this useful thing called freeze. So I can hover over this and right click and freeze, or there's a button to freeze it up there as well. And that's going to lock it at whatever value it is. So it's frozen at 2 now. So if I get hit, my health shouldn't go down from 2. And if I set it back to 3, my health should be 3. And if I get hit, nothing will, like the health won't decrease at all. So it's kind of like if you've ever used a Game Shark, it's similar to using like a Game Shark code or something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and add it to something called our RAM watch. And this is a list of all the RAM values that we care about. I'm going to make a little note and call it health, and that'll be fine. So if I set my health to, I don't know, 10, the game doesn't look very happy about that, but that's what 10 health looks like, I guess. 9, 8, 7. So this is working how it should. Okay, let's look for some other useful RAM addresses. Health was pretty easy to find because it's like just goes 3, then 2, then 1. Other RAM addresses are a bit harder to find. Let's have a go at finding our time. So 197, 196, 5, 4, 3. I'm going to search for something that is 193. There we go. But see, these numbers aren't decreasing at all. So none of these are the time. In fact, if I search for something that was 183 now, because that's supposed to be the time, it gets rid of all those. So we've had no luck finding the time like that. So let's try a different approach. We're going to start a new search. We're going to let the time run down for a bit, down to 173. We're going to compare to our previous value, and the time is less than the previous value. The previous value is where we started at on our search. So I'm going to let the time run down a bit more, maybe to 170. And it's going to be less than our previous value when it was at 173. So we'll search that again. Now I've gone a few frames ahead and it's still 170. So I want it to be equal to the previous value. And it looks like we've isolated what our time might be there. 112, 105, 104, 3, 2, 1. So this is ticking down with the time, but it looks a bit different. But if I, instead of looking at it in unsigned, I look at it in hex, this is matching. 52, 51, 50, 49, 48, 47. So there's a couple of different ways of looking at numbers. The main ones are like unsigned and hex. Now, if you're not familiar with hex at all, don't worry too much about it. Hex is pretty much just another way of counting that computers use. So if I go to my RAM and I just pick a random thing like this 0, if I want to count up, I'll go in hex 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Usually we're familiar with 10 coming after this, but in hex it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, and then it goes up to 10. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you get the picture. Now, because this was 9, that in hex, the OA is 10, OB is 11, OC is 12, 13, 14, 15, and then that is actually 16 in hex. So hex is a bit weird, but it's just another way of looking at numbers. So we have found the time. It's in hex, 69 seconds. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this in the RAM watch. So it's all the way down here. And we can see this is ticking down. Now, if my time was at 197, I can see I've got a 1 there and a 97. If I set this 1 to be 9, the time goes up to 994. And it looks like this thing here ticking down might be our milliseconds. So if I freeze that, so I stop it from being able to move, it looks like our time can't tick down. But I could still set the time to be 940, for example. And then when it ticks back down, it should go down to 939. Okay, so it looks like these 3 values are our time. So I'm going to highlight all 3 and add them to our RAM watch. So we've got these 3 in here now. So let's quickly label what these are. So this is time seconds. This is time in minutes, or not in minutes, sorry, in hundreds. So if my time is 937 seconds, that's 0937 there. And this is, I don't want to call it milliseconds. I'm going to call it like sub-seconds. And when it's laid out like this, if I unfreeze everything, we should see the time ticking down like this, just looking at these 3 values ticking down here. And that reads pretty nicely with our time. If I freeze it all, the time gets frozen. Alright, so if you're doing testing, you could freeze your health at 3 and your time like that, and then you've got an unlimited amount of time and health to kind of play around with, so you don't keep dying when you're trying to test stuff about your game. But that's not what the good stuff is. The good stuff with TASing is looking more about the physics variables, so Mickey's exact position and his speed and all that good stuff. So that's all in RAM 2. It's a bit harder to find than this stuff, but we will be able to find it. Let's load this more simpler room so there's not enemies running around and everything trying to mess with us and our speed. Alright. So with Mickey's position, he's got an X position and a Y position. So his X position is how far across the screen he is, and his Y position is how far up and down he is. If I go left, my X position should go down, and if I go right, it should go up. So let's try this. We're going to start a new search, and Mickey's staying at the same X position for a little while, so we're just going to hit search equals previous value a couple of times. You can even jump and search equals previous value. Because our X position isn't changing, it should be equal this whole time. Now I'm going to move to the right. So I'm going to move over to the right a bit. I'm going to hit greater than previous value. Our X position should be greater than what it was before. Let's hit search again. Now we've got some candidates for our X position. Let's do it one more time. So I'm going to move to the right again, hit greater than previous value, and I'll move to the left and I'll hit less than previous value. Now it looks like all of these are going up and down with our X position. And if you don't like it in hex, we can switch back to unsigned, and all of these are going up and down with our X position. But, I mean, which one of these is our X position? Let's try just freezing a few of them and seeing what happens. So I'm going to freeze this 117 here. Looks like that's our X position. We got pretty lucky there. If you try freezing some other values, like if I froze this one here, Mickey can still move. In fact, if I froze all of these, Mickey can still move. But it's only when I freeze this one that he stops moving. This is pretty common. Usually, like this one here would be his actual X position, O2OD, and all the others would be tied to kind of animation and stuff like that. So they're all important, but this O2OD is his actual X position. Let's view that in the hex editor and see what's happening. So 8.7, and as I move to the right, it goes up. I can freeze it, which will stop him moving. Now, if I set this to a smaller number like 20, he should zip over there. And if I set it to a really big number like F0, F0, he'll be over there. So that's definitely his X position. Now, his X position is actually a bit more fine than that. This is his position in pixels. So there's about 256 pixels on the screen right now that he can go on. But he's also got something called subpixels. So if I freeze his X position, you can see that he's frozen, but he still moves left and right like a tiny little bit in that. And that's because his subpixels are changing. Now, usually his subpixels are pretty close to your X position, and they're really hard to find. Luckily, in our case, the subpixel is right here. So is it a subpixel of 80 now? And subpixels are just basically like fractions of pixels. So let's have a look. Let's start running with Mickey and seeing how these two values change. 1980. I'm just going to set the data size to 2 bytes, and I've got 1980 there. When I start moving, it's going to climb up 1980. So it's a bit higher. This 19 hasn't gone up, but this subpixel has gone up. Next, C0. So he's moved a bit further then. Next, 1A00. So his whole pixel has moved up. 1A40, 1A0. The next one should roll over to 1B. 1B. This can be a bit confusing since it's in hex, but you can just read it like a normal number. I'm going to add it to our RAM watch, and we'll give it the lovely label of X position. And rather than having to read it in hex, we're going to read it as a unsigned. So a little rundown of what each of these do. Unsigned is just a normal number. Signed is a normal number with negative numbers as well. So, for example, our X position will be unsigned because you can't have a negative X position. But when we find our speed, that'll probably be signed because you can have a negative speed by going left. Hex is what we saw before, and then these last couple you don't really use. So unsigned there. 6912 is his X position. So if I start moving right again, he's at 7808 now. 7840, 7872, 7936, 800, 8096, 8192, and he keeps moving to the right. And eventually he's going to be running really fast, so we're going to go up by like 300 every frame. Very, very quick. And if I start moving left again, it's going to start going down. And if I stop, it's going to stop. If I freeze it as well, Mickey won't be able to move. And you can see that he's a bit less jittery now with his walking because we've frozen the subpixels as well. Similarly to the X position, we've also got a Y position. And just at this point as well, I'll display watches on screen so we can see them there. We've also got a Y position, and it's usually kind of near the X position, so we can just look around here and see where it is. I'll unfreeze X there. So it looks like when I jump, this thing is changing here. And if I jump and then freeze it, Mickey's stuck in the air. If I unfreeze it, he goes down. If I freeze it and try and jump, he's stuck on the ground there. And if I set this to like, I don't know, 2000, he's going to be all the way up there in the sky. So it looks like this thing here is our Y position. And we're almost done with this stuff. The next thing we need is speed. So speed is, well, we can just look because it's usually around here. If not, you got to do a RAM search for it. This thing looks like a good candidate for our X speed just here. So when I go right, it goes all the way up to 180 and stops there. When I let go, it goes down. This is pretty good. Now, if I freeze this, Mickey shouldn't be able to move. So this thing here is our X speed. X speak is not what I meant to write. X speed. So we actually have two ways of stopping Mickey from moving. We could freeze our speed at 0, or we could freeze our position. There's two different ways to stop Mickey from moving there. Last thing we're going to need is Y speed. And this is just looking around the same area again. So it looks like this thing here might be Y speed. So we're going to add this to our RAM watch. Y speed, and let's just try freezing it to make sure that's what it is. Yep, that's our Y speed, because we can't jump if our Y speed is 0. All right. Now, weird thing, if we have a look at our X speed, if I go right, it climbs up to 180. Actually, let's view it in unsigned. Same as our Y speed. Just in case you don't like hex. So if I go to the right, it climbs up to 384. But if I go left, my X speed is really big. So that's a bit weird. That's because we need to be viewing it as not an unsigned, but a signed. Sign means it can be negative as well. Now, if I go left, I get negative 384. If I go right, I get positive 384. Now, if we think about what this actually means, I might put X speed next to X position here. If I'm moving to the right, my speed's going to start at 0. Eventually, it'll go up to 32. What this 32 means is on the next frame, my X position is going to go up by 32. So 32 plus 32 is 64. It should go to 17634, 64, which it does. Another 32 on top of that should go to 96, so 17696, which it does. And then if I add 64 to that, it should go up to 17760, which it does. And if I get to a really high speed, the next frame, 384, will get added to 392, which gives us that number there. So that's how your speeds work. And I have forgot to make Y speed signed as well. So this is all pretty good with a RAM watch, but these numbers aren't very good. Like 20,000 is a really big number to keep track of in your head. And even worse than that, once the screen starts scrolling, our position gets a bit weird because I'm at 34616 for like this whole time. Because Mickey's technically at the same spot on the screen here, but it's the screen that's scrolling there. And once the screen stops scrolling and he moves to the right, his position increases because he's getting closer to the right edge of the screen. So that's a bit of a pain. We'll have to deal with that after. But I think that'll be all for this part with the RAM watches. Next time I want to talk about Lewis scripting, which is a way to, well, Lewis scripting is very useful. One of the things it can do is take this data that we have here and display it a bit more nicely. So that'll be on the next part. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you then.